perhaps if I had never picked up that geology book and had never looked at that first page for planetary science, I may not have gone down that route.
You're listening to The Cosmic Cast. Hello, and welcome back to The Cosmic Cast, brought to you by the Earth and Solar System team at the University of Manchester. I'm John Penny-Fisher, and as per usual, I'm joined by Marissa Lowe.
Hello.
Ricky Bahir.
Hello.
Tom Harvey.
Hello.
And last, but by no means least, Elliot Carter. So we've got a real bumper episode for you all this week. This is in fact the season finale. We're going to take a little bit of a break over the next month or so to recharge our batteries. But we thought as a very special episode to end this our second season, we'd reach out to some of the guests that have appeared on this season to try and find out a bit about what people's inspirations were, either growing up or at university, and how they got into geology and planetary science in the first place. So I think it's quite an interesting sort of point of view, isn't it? So I've come to realize recently that, a lot of my interests haven't really changed since I was like 4 or 5 years old. I'm still interested in the same sort of things. I find that fascinating, really, how...
You've always been interested in shirts and braces.
Just always been interested. You joke, but actually I have got photographs of me at age 2 wearing braces.
Really?
So I think for me, I've always been a massive fan of like science fiction, and like I've always used to enjoy watching things like Star Trek and things like that. And so it was always, I've always had an interest in space. And when I was younger, I always used to like have various like glossy picture books of planets and nebulas and stuff. And it was always like fascinating looking at in the great outdoors. But moreover, I've always actually had a fascination with isotopes. I remember really actually quite vividly when I first learned what an isotope was in, I think it was, I guess just before GCSE chemistry. And I just remember just thinking that was just so cool that, it was an element, but yet different. And I was just, I don't know why it gripped me so much. But from that though, it's not like I then sought out to become an isotope geochemist. I'd sort of parked that interest, and it was only really when I got to university that I realized that there was an actual applications for understanding isotopes, and I was like, oh my god, I've got to do this, right? So it's just, I don't know, it's just weird. I remember very clearly. We used to have our exams in the school gym, and we all used to line up to go in along the corridor that led to it. And I probably did this as well, but you used to have your notes and ask other people questions about things that might come up in the test and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I was going up and down the corridor asking people, define an isotope, and no one could. And I remember being very pleased with myself that I was able to define what an isotope was. So that was very good. Yeah. And then also, I guess I've always had an interest in geology as well. I remember I got into a lot of trouble in primary school because I thought it'd be quite fun to try and dig a massive hole in the playground to try and find like minerals and stuff. And this was right outside the school building, like just by the road. And so I don't think it was a good look that there was just me digging up all the grass. And teachers didn't like that very much.
I very much, I identify with that parked interest things, because I was definitely one of the people who was super into rocks and minerals as a kid. Like I had a sort of little cardboard set of drawers just full of all kinds of things I'd collected. And I guess even further back, I had there was warnings that I might become a geologist, because I used to like eating sand and gravel in the garden, which caused my mum some worry.
Yeah, and that's why I called you the Smectite King.
But yeah, definitely sort of parked that for a good, I don't know, this is probably when I'm 10, and then really it wasn't until uni that I got into geology.
Yeah.
So like as a teenager, I was really into popular science and like brief history of time, books like that. This is absolutely mind-blowing. Like quantum mechanics, when I first learned about this, sort of you experience time differently depending on your state of motion. So like no one shares the same reality really. It's just mind-blowing. So I went to uni to do physics, and I guess as luck would have it, I wasn't a very good physicist. So I realised, I think, this might be something in common with a lot of people, well, a few people in geology, but like I realised I could pour my life into this but not be very good at it. And luckily I had geology as another option, and I was absolutely loving it. Yeah, so it sort of came full circle back to that love of rocks and minerals as a kid.
Yeah, always comes full circle.
See, I personally knew I was made to do planetary science from a very young age, because I remember one of my earliest memories, I think I was about 3 years old, and I had walked out over to, we had this huge window, and I walked over to it, and I looked out of the window, and I looked into the sky, and there was this bright light shining down on me, this bright circular light. And at that moment, I realized I discovered the moon. So it was a huge step already in scientific
It's amazing that you were
endeavors.
taking those steps at such a young age, 15,
I know.
for, you know, discovering the moon.
I know.
I'll be honest, I thought was gonna give a sincere answer there, but I guess that was just very naive on my part.
Well, no,
wasn't
so
it?
I had a fascination with the sky, and just as a young age, for the light's perspective of it, without any understanding of how far away what these things were. I remember, so that was my earliest one of my actually earliest memories is looking up at the moon in the sky.
What age?
And as I said, about 3 years old, I think.
3 years old. Okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And I remember that vividly, and that was nothing to do with why I got into planetary science whatsoever. But as I aged, I really found myself being drawn towards physics and mathematics, and it was about the same thing about you, Elliot. It was the whole quantum mechanics thing. It was about how time dilation and stuff like that really fascinated me, and also Newton's laws of physics was something that really I could grasp. And it was, for me at school, I didn't do that well at school. I found it hard to visualize a lot of things to do with physics and chemistry and biology as well. But that was something I could really grasp onto, and I found that very enjoyable. And I found myself, when I was about the age of 16, reading a book called Parallel Worlds by Michio Kaku.
I read that. And, yeah, it's a great book.
That was almost the nail in the coffin for me of wanting to really pursue this further. But it was that same thing of I found things like astronomy, and it was something, again, I couldn't visualize well enough to get my head around, but actual planetary science, the physical, being able to look at something physically and interpret it, I could really get my mind around. So that's what pushed me more into that direction. And unfortunately, prior to university, A-levels, we didn't have geology at my school, and it wasn't something that was really talked about. No. So physics and maths, everyone went, well, you obviously want to do mechanical engineering then if you want physics and maths. So I originally applied for mechanical engineering, and then when I went to the open day at Manchester, I just walked past the Williamson building and went inside and started looking around at these minerals and stuff, and I managed to apply also for geology and planetary science instead, and decided to take that instead. So I was super lucky in that sense. So yeah, that's what basically took me to where I am now.
Wow, just from walking past the Williamson building. Did you have any idea that course existed before then?
No, so I obviously knew geology was a thing, but I didn't know planetary science was a thing. So that really, was a thing that allowed me to see that.
See, I was never that into rocks when I was younger. I wasn't the kid who ate mud or whatever you said, Elliot. I definitely came... gravel, yes.
You basically got concrete in your stomach.
So it's not...
now, it's been a while.
Isn't they called gastroliths, John?
But yeah, I was never that child who collected rocks on the beach and looked at fossils or anything like that. I definitely came at it from a more astronomy side of things. So in fact, growing up, my favorite TV show, which was on Fox Kids, was a TV show called Sailor Moon. So it was a manga and an anime from the 90s, and partially coincidentally, I'm wearing a t-shirt of the characters today. Not for this video, maybe, I'm not sure.
Subconsciously.
Yeah, but it was about these this team of girls who had like magical powers. So there was Sailor Moon, who harnessed the power of the moon to like fight all the baddies, and then there were all her friends, Sailor Mercury, Sailor Mars, Sailor Jupiter, Sailor Venus. And it wasn't a show about astronomy, but it made me think, whoa, it's so cool that all these planets have their own personalities, because that's what I thought. I thought each of the characters were the personalities of the different planets. And from that, I just remember getting some books out of the library and getting a notebook from, Woolworths or something like that, and filling out little fact files about each of the planets with like any information I could find. So just writing out things from books again, like Venus is this many kilometers in size, or the moon is this far away from the Earth. But just things like that really captured my interest somehow. But
Mars is sassy, for instance.
Yeah, Mars is sassy and has the power of fire.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah, which is why, Ricky, you're so drawn to Mars, isn't it?
Exactly.
But yeah, that didn't actually really carry on into school. Like, I definitely had a very balanced interest between English, maths, science, geography, things like that. I guess it was only sort of later on, probably through like science experiments. That's the things that kind of, the hands-on fun things where you got to make stuff in chemistry. That's what sort of got me back onto going, oh yeah, science is the thing I want to do. And then, to be honest, when it came to picking what to do for university, I sort of did geology as an accident, in that I saw earth science courses and I thought, earth sciences, that's just physical geography. I love physical geography, I'll do that. And I kind of got there and I went, oh, earth sciences courses are the same as geology courses. Okay, all right, well, this is going well, so let's keep doing it. So yeah, lots of little clues and accidents along the way.
Yeah, that's often the case though, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about you, Tom?
I think my kind of interest in geology and planetary science was a bit of luck and a bit of kind of not destiny, but so my dad is a geologist, and so when I was a kid, it was never like impressed upon me that like I was going to follow in footsteps or anything, but I think a lot of trips that we would go on, if we would go places, there'd always be some element of, well, we've got to go and look at that rock. And I think without it necessarily being intentional, his enthusiasm for the subject kind of rubbed off a little bit. And so when I was little, I liked having my little mineral collection under my bed. I still have that somewhere.
Nice.
I can go and look at that because it's all very simple things when I'm trying to think about the more complicated stuff. And I think that kind of sparked an interest in not just geology, but like the kind of the natural world, the kind of whole, everything as a system as a whole. And so when I was in school, I really liked the sciences, and particularly the kind of application parts of the sciences. The theoretical stuff I found more difficult, but when you could visualize what it was attached to, then that was much easier. And in a lot of subjects, one of the kind of applications in chemistry or physics or maths or whatever you're looking at is to think about like the Earth system one way or another. And so when the time came to pick a subject for university, I actually was just a bit greedy because I liked doing maths and physics and chemistry and a bit of biology. And I also really liked history. And to be honest, Earth and planetary science is effectively all of those things rolled into one. Because I don't think that many geologists would describe themselves as a pure chemist, physicist, mathematician, or any of those things. You know, it's kind of collaboration is the beauty of the science. And I think that's what kind of drove me to do it at university. And then I guess a little bit of nerdiness must have kicked in at some point, because clearly the draw of applying all of the stuff that I'd learned about the Earth to planetary systems was just a little bit too sci-fi for me to say no to. And actually, when I was first looking at universities, I toured the Manchester Earth Science Department and saw, I think it's the TOF sims in the isotope labs, and I just thought it looked like the center console from the TARDIS, and a kind of confluence of all of that together just meant that it was pretty inescapable. So yeah,
it's a good point actually. I remember the first time I saw a mass spectrometer, and I just remember thinking, this is what computers look like, isn't it, with big banks of machines and big electronic racks and stuff. And it's like, that's pretty cool.
I think a machine that fills a room.
Yeah, to a certain extent, with modern computers, we've been cheated of the look at the size of this analytical machine.
With proper like knobs and buttons that you press to do stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to see that we've all had different influences through our life that has brought us to where we are now and allowed us to pursue our passions. So should we go over to see what some of our guests have said about this?
Absolutely. So we've recorded this on slightly different days, so there might be a few continuity errors. And Tom, you're actually on holiday at the moment, so you're not in all of these clips, unfortunately. But yeah, let's take a look.
Right. Now we have Eleanor, Jennings, Birkbeck. So we'd love to ask you, what inspired you to get into Earth and planetary science?
Yeah, okay. So I was thinking about this one, and it's quite a difficult question in a way, because I never had that moment. You know, we're not of the generation where we saw the moon landings on TV. That would have been a big one, I'm sure. But we're all a little bit younger than that, I'm guessing. So yeah, it's kind of a tricky one. So actually, I came into Earth and planetary science through geology and through Earth science. And I always knew, I'm not sure why I always knew I wanted to be a geologist. So I was that dorky child, you know, the not particularly cool one, the one who for their 8th birthday said, "Mummy, I don't want to party, I just want to go to the Natural History Museum and go to the Minerals Gallery on my own." I was that child. I did that. And I told off the volunteer for calling it fool's gold and not pyrite. So I've been on this path for a long, long time. Yeah, I must have been a nightmare as a child. But yeah, I used to collect rocks, collect minerals, make little mineral museum in my bedroom that I dragged my family to. So I've always been down this route. I've always found these things fascinating. And it was from such a young age that I honestly can't even remember something that triggered that, but it's always been about volcanoes, about rocks, about minerals for me. And I've always loved that, and I kind of always knew I'd end there. So I went to university to study geology. Oh, and there was one more event actually. So by pure fluke, I signed up to something at school called Astronomy Club. Now, I was not actually interested in Astronomy Club, but someone told me it would look good on my UCAS form, and I happened to be at a school that had an Astronomy Club, so I was like, sure, I'll do that. And actually, we discovered a near-Earth asteroid, or what would you call it? An asteroid with an orbit that comes very close to Earth's orbit. Yeah, a near-Earth object, a near-Earth asteroid. And so that was extremely exciting. And tragically, I don't have any information about it. I don't know what number or name it's been given or anything. But and we got invited to a press conference for the Deep Impact mission. I don't know if you remember the Deep Impact mission. It was
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember what it was. I can't remember.
It was the
now.
one where they ploughed a sort of washing machine-sized copper projectile into the side of a comet, and then they flew through the dust that came out of it, and they found out what it was made of.
It's not a film starring Bruce Willis, is it? I don't think.
No. And yeah, we went to the press conference of that, and we took over one of the Hawaiian observatories, the public one, the one that you can just book time on, and we actually viewed this impact happening from Earth, which, you know, was like 2 pixels turning into 3 pixels, then turning back to 2 pixels. But yeah, so that was actually, I didn't expect to get anything out of that, but actually that made me think that astronomy was a super cool topic as well. I think there's a moral in this story as well, which is actually to do with sort of what you're exposed to as a child and what you have access to when you're in education. Like, I used to love going to the Natural History Museum more than anything. It was my absolute favorite place in the world. And it just goes to show that even if children are really young, even if you think, oh, this child is too young for a boring minerals gallery, that is not true. No child is too young for a boring, I mean, it's not boring, is it? No child is too young for a minerals gallery. But yeah, so I remember, I mean, I was in the kind of family where we'd often go to different museums and stuff. And actually museums are such an excellent resource. And if you go to a wide range of them, no one else in my family is a scientist. No one else has anything to do with science. So, you know, you go to some archaeology museum, some history museum, some art place, some science museum, and then people can just discover for themselves what it is that really grabs them. I think that's how it worked for me. I think basically the Natural History Museum is responsible.
Fantastic. Well, Eleanor, thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's there's a great moral there for sure.
So next joining us is Naomi Rogerni from the University of Leicester. Thanks very much for joining us today.
No problem.
So what were your inspirations for getting into Earth and planetary science?
So I got into science as a child when I went to the planetarium when I must have been maybe 5-6 years old in London, and it just blew my mind, and I didn't even know that space was a thing. So like it made me look up from then on and be like, wow, that's what's out there. So then I always loved science, especially physics, and then went on to study astrophysics at university. Hated astrophysics, realized. because like the cosmology and stuff, it just went over my head way too much. But I always loved geography as well, so I did. I kind of figured out I liked a combination of both, which was like atmospheres plus space. So yeah, that's how I got into the atmospheres of planets.
So did you always have quite a clear path in your mind that, this is the sort of thing I want to be doing?
No, definitely not. I mean, as I said, I thought I was into cosmology and like black holes and stuff, and then probably about 6 months in, I was like, what have I done? Because I was always really bad at math, so and that's very maths heavy. So I was more into kind of like observing and like data and looking at pretty pictures and stuff. So yeah, definitely I changed all throughout.
Yeah.
So prior to university, did you know that planetary science was even an option available to people? Or
No, I didn't. I didn't even know when I'd graduated from university, I didn't know that planetary atmospheres was a thing, because I thought I had to choose between studying space for the PhD and studying atmospheres for the PhD. So I was kind of, should I do meteorology or should I do astronomy? I don't know. And then I was like, hang on a second. Other planets have atmospheres. Let's just type in like planetary atmospheres. And then like my supervisor's name popped up because he'd just joined University of Leicester, and I was like, would you look at that? So it's kind of fate, I suppose.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So you've always loved geography and in particular physics. Was there something about those subjects that got you into them in the first place?
That's a good question. I don't actually know. I suppose it's like they're very practical and like easy to imagine, but then also they're kind of bigger than you can imagine properly. So like it's like it's interesting to think about, but also easy to think about, I suppose.
Yeah, they're tangible but still like blowing.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So early on, did you ever think you were going to go into research, or was that just sort of
I honestly didn't know what I was going to do with I still have no idea what I'm going to do with my life, and I'm like a year away from graduating the PhD, so who knows? Honestly, in 5 years' time, I honestly could be anything from a circus performer to a weather girl, like I said on the podcast. I could be anything. I honestly have no idea.
Well, if you are a circus performer, we'll have you back on and say, what in your childhood influenced you becoming a circus performer?
Definitely nothing. I was the least sporty child ever.
Nice one.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like, I think it's so nice how, like, we have these little moments like in the planetarium there. Like, they sort of stick with you all your life, don't they? Really.
Definitely.
And I do really wonder what is it that makes people, go, I don't know, I've just always liked science.
Yeah. Because when you're that sort of age, like, it's not like you're really sort of thinking through, why you like something. You just do, don't you? I suppose.
I feel like all kids are scientists. Like they're all like
curious.
They all have, yeah, exactly. It's just like asking questions about like what you see around you, right? And it's a real shame that some people get it like kicked out of them.
Yeah, it's like eventually your mum's just annoyed, like, just shut up, it's like that.
Yeah. And like, you have to learn this maths to understand it. It's like, no, actually you don't.
Lovely. Well, thanks very much, Naomi, for sharing that with us. That was really great. Thank you.
That's all right.
So next up, we're joined by Katherine Joy. How's it going?
Hello, I'm good. Hope you guys are.
Not too bad, thanks. So what were some of your inspirations then when you were growing up to get into planetary science or geology?
Yeah, good question. So I guess I don't really know what it was exactly that tipped me towards a career, and I'd say more in geology than planetary science. But there's a few things looking back that I can remember about, and one was doing a school project about the space shuttle, which was actually in English rather than science for some reason. And I remember when we were doing this project, I checked a book out of the library about the space shuttle, which talked about careers, like how you became an astronaut, and it mentioned all these fancy words I didn't understand, like geophysical degree, and I was like, I have no clue what that was. So then I started reading around what a geophysical degree was. And I think from that, I then checked out like Helen Sharman's autobiography, who is the first British astronaut that flew to the Mir space station in the 1990s. And I think I must have read that about 5 times. And then Apollo 13 also came out at the same time. So it was kind of a grouping of all these things happening that made me think, oh, that would be just so cool to be an astronaut, which then I completely parked and forgot about when I applied for degree subjects. So I guess it's one of those funny things that you get interested in, you get really inspired by, and then something diverts you off course, but actually I've come back to it a bit later on in life.
You ever thought about applying seriously for the astronaut program?
Good question. So I did last time when ESA announced their call, which would have been about 10 years ago now, and I didn't even get past the first round. So I think at that point I had probably ticked the criteria that they were looking for, but I think I was a little bit too young. I was sort of under the younger age limit.
Right.
Sadly now, because they've not done a call for 10 years, I'm now probably over the age limit. So I've probably missed out on my opportunity to go. But I think there's plenty of other exciting things you can do around space exploration.
Was there anything in particular that got you into geology in the first place, or was that a fairly sort of random choice?
I would say probably my parents mostly. They did geology as part of their geography degrees, and so they were always explaining bits of geology to me. And I always had to answer questions about rocks I'd pick up on a beach and showing them fossils and things. So probably their encouragement. And frankly, I hated human geography at school, so I always sort of gravitated towards the physical geography side, which naturally brought me to geology. So I had a bit of a slightly unusual change of mind during my A-levels, and I actually applied to university to do media studies and broadcasting studies. I wanted to be a journalist, and the one degree program I applied for was science and the media, which I know, John, you also ended up applying for, which gave you the opportunity to do media studies and a science, hence geology. But then I dropped the media studies after the first year, so I ended up doing the science. So as I say, I've kind of come to this through a completely roundabout route. There we go.
Cool.
Bit odd. But yeah, hopefully that's answered your questions. A mixed route. I'd say it's always very serendipitous. Some people know exactly what they want to do and some people don't. And I think I probably fell into the latter category. And now I've lost the light, I look like I'm sitting in a cave. There we go. Latter category, and it's just been a case of being in the right place at the right time with a lot of things. I think that's probably a good lesson in life. Always be prepared to change your mind.
Cool. Katie, thanks very much.
No problem.
And now we have Dr. Frances Butcher from the University of Sheffield. Thanks for joining us, Frances. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. So what were some of your inspirations for pursuing a career in Earth and planetary science?
So I actually grew up in the northwest of England in Cumbria, specifically in the Lake District, which is an incredible, you've probably heard of it, like mountainous, glaciated landscape, and a lot of other things going on as well besides that. And I used to drive to school through that scenery, so I was always staring out the window, and I'd learn something in geography one day and then I would be driving home and I'd see it in the landscape. And as well as that, I also was completely obsessed with astronomy. So my parents had me looking down telescopes from probably before I could walk. So when I realised I could combine the two, I was just like mind blown. So I now call it space geography, because I wasn't really aware that space geography was a thing at school. I thought geography was geography and space was space. But when I realised that you could study glaciers on other planets and volcanoes on other planets, that was me set. I was there. So yeah, I guess I was very fortunate to have all of those factors. And yeah, I guess that was my inspiration for it.
At what point did you realise that space geography was a thing?
I guess I became aware of it probably when I was in sixth form, just because I guess if you'd asked me just before sixth form, I would have said I was going to do a pure science degree like physics or maths or something. And then I kind of became aware that maybe I was neglecting this other passion, which was geography, and that if I did that kind of thing, then I'm I know physicists do go into earth and planetary science, for example, but at that point I didn't know that. So I thought, well, I don't want to give up on this other passion of mine as well. So I sort of pursued that, knowing that I could then go for the physicsy side of geography. So I did a geography degree in the end, and then I've brought it back to the sciencey side of that. So yeah, I sort of became aware of it in towards the end of sixth form, and that sort of cemented that I could do geography and I could end up where I wanted to be. And then actually my first lecture of my degree was about the geography of space. And I was sitting there so excited, I couldn't believe it. So yeah, it was great.
So next, we're joined by Dr. David Gelsthorpe from the Manchester Museum. How's it going?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, how are you?
Not too bad. So what were some of your inspirations then growing up? How did you sort of get into science? Was there anything when you were growing up that was particularly inspired you? Or?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I guess I always really loved being in the outdoors. I always really loved kind of going in. I grew up in Sheffield, so going into Derbyshire with my mum and dad, going for walks around places like Castleton and stuff, just seeing amazing things and just being really excited by the world around us. And I guess that kind of went on into school and then eventually university, and kind of discovered museums through that. Obviously, we'd been visiting museums right through childhood and stuff like that, but I realised museums were actually a brilliant way of using real geology, talking to real people about real objects that have amazing stories behind, whether that's fossils from billions of years ago or meteorites from the far reaches of space. And just sharing these stories is what I really enjoy and what get a real buzz out of, actually, and that definitely continues to this day.
Yeah. Do you think 10-year-old you would have been quite happy with where you've ended up today?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a day where I don't go to work thinking, wow, this is actually really cool in all sorts of ways.
Were there any particular museums that you visited that were particularly memorable?
Yeah, I do remember one of our regular summer holiday trips with my mum and my two brothers was to Sheffield Western Park Museum, which in the 1980s, Sheffield was a little bit grim, kind of coming out of the miners' strike and things like that. And I remember the museum, all sorts of really cool things. It was a bit drab and a bit run down, but often there was nobody else in a midweek day in the school holidays, and really enjoying things like seeing the bear, stuff like that, because it was the nearest you could get to a real bear when you were 10 years old and seeing it on the telly. So really enjoyed things like that, and obviously they've had some fantastic redevelopments since. But yeah, a really special kind of place in my childhood, really.
Yeah, I guess in the 1970s, actually, I think that museum holds some of the Apollo samples briefly.
Yes, one thing I do remember actually is I was only born in '77, so I wasn't around when they had the Apollo samples there. But I do remember in the '80s, my dad taking us to some tiny little booth in the middle of the university because they brought a tiny moon sample back as I presume it was probably some anniversary. I do remember going to this booth and I couldn't really see properly over the top of the counter. And even when we did see, it was the tiniest, tiny little fragments. And I must admit, I was slightly disappointed. But kind of it was cool anyway, because it was a bit.
Yeah.
So were your parents particularly interested in science as well? And do you feel like that may have influenced you?
No, not at all, really. I think they were kind of always really keen that they did the best they possibly could for us, which is fantastic. But no, they'd not got a science background. My mum went to university and did geography, but my dad didn't even get to university, he was an accountant. So yeah, they were just wanting us to do interesting things and kind of try and broaden horizons, I guess, like lots of parents try and do. So yeah, it was just encouragement more than anything.
Yeah. Fantastic. David, thank you very much.
Yeah. My pleasure.
So now we're joined by Tara Hayden from the Open University. Thanks very much for joining us, Tara. Great to see you. So what inspired you to get into Earth and planetary science?
So in my degree, I did geology, and I really enjoyed using the components of rocks to understand the history of the Earth and what it can tell us about how different parts of the Earth formed. And when I was in my final year, I was able to study Martian meteorites, and it was really interesting to be able to look at these rocks from another planet and actually see how similar they were to the rocks that we have on Earth, and then use that and use my knowledge of rocks on Earth to understand and reconstruct part of the history of Mars, a body that we've never set foot on, but we still can actually construct some of its history by looking at these samples. And it was just amazing to be holding something not from this planet. It was really cool because it's, you get excited doing those things. Mm-hmm. And so I decided I wanted to pursue a career in research. I wanted to really understand how rocks from other planets worked, how similar they were to Earth, and what they could tell us about the history of our solar system. I found that really exciting to try and understand and be part of.
Did you mostly get this interest while you were at university, or were there any points earlier on that you'd say, got you interested in space or rocks or anything?
I mean, it was mostly at university, I've got to say, but it was still, everyone's interested in space when you're a kid, of course. So you look up at the stars and you're like, I want to explore the stars, I want to be an astronaut. But then being able to actually not even leave our planet and learn something about another part of our solar system is amazing to actually be able to do.
What was it that took you to the geology degree then?
I had that actually as a second option in university in Scotland. You're able to take several options of degree courses in your first year so that you can explore different options for your future. And I took geology as another option, and I thought it was quite cool. And I actually decided, no, this is what I'm more interested in. This is what I actually understand a lot easier, and this is more exciting to me. So I decided I'd pursue a degree in geology because I really enjoyed trying to understand how rocks became the way they were, and it was what made them up, and it was really cool to me.
What was your first option then?
My first option was geography, and I also took politics alongside it.
Okay.
So a complete mix of different subjects, and then I ended up doing rocks because rocks are cool. Because rocks
All the best parts of geography.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Tara. It's great to see where your enthusiasm came from. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right then, so next from Tartese, thanks very much for popping on to talk to us. So what were some of your inspirations then growing up?
My inspirations growing up, wow, I wasn't expecting such a start. I'm not quite sure. I've always enjoyed STEM subjects throughout school and then secondary school. So I guess I was interested in anything related to physics, biology, math a little less so. We don't really do geology before university in France. There's a bit of geology merged into the biology program, but it's very limited. So I guess at the end of high school, I had to find something to do at university. Interestingly enough, my worst grade at the baccalaureate, which the equivalent of the A-level, was biology, and I chose a biology degree. I'm not quite sure why. So, yeah, I went into the university, signed up on a biology degree, and in the second year, there was geology as an option. I ticked the box, and then went out for a couple of field trips locally around Rennes in Brittany, where I studied. And I just loved it, loved being outside, looking at some rocks with friends, and I was sold from there.
So that was quite random then, really, if you
That's
hadn't done that module.
Yeah. That is very random. I wasn't planning or dreaming on doing anything geology or planetary science related as a kid or a teenager. Probably didn't even know it existed, to be honest.
So what took you from that module to actually transitioning not just only into geology but into the planetary science part of it?
So I didn't encounter much planetary science before actually leaving France for my first postdoc. So I did my undergrad and postgrad studies looking at terrestrial rocks. I did my PhD on terrestrial systems, granites, and fluid speculations within granite. And when I graduated, there was a postdoc advertised at the OU, look at lunar samples using lab techniques that I had expertise with. I had the technical skills and background. I didn't have the subject background, but that's all fine. You can always learn a new topic and a new subject. So I thought, why not? And started from there looking at planetary samples, which was quite cool.
So you said you've always enjoyed STEM subjects more, I guess, compared to, say, arts subjects. Was there, I don't know, was it influence from your parents? Were there certain teachers, would you say, that influenced that, or something else?
Teachers, probably, I guess. I mean, I enjoyed quite a large range of things. I mostly enjoyed the subjects that were taught by great teachers, in fact.
Yeah.
I guess that's the right way around, rather than loving the subject. I got interest in history, geography, these sorts of things. Always been less keen on literature. I don't know why. I like reading, but I didn't really enjoy like interpreting what you're reading about and trying to be in the writer's mind to try and understand what they meant.
So instead you want to get into the rock's mind and interpret that.
Yeah, exactly. It's more of a freestyle approach. So yeah, I think it's mostly, and throughout the university degree, it was the same actually. I guess I was always more into the hard rock part of the earth sciences, but really geochemistry. I specialized in geochemistry because the guy who taught us geochemistry I thought was amazing, and it's most of the time I suppose it's the same for most people. It's who you are taught by that really affects what you do.
Absolutely.
So if people teaching in earth and planetary science listen to that episode, be good at teaching and be enthusiastic. That's the most important thing, I think. Being enthusiastic for your subject.
Yeah, for sure.
But nothing was planned. I mean, earlier on, if I'm trying to remember now my teenager years, earlier on, I've always done all right at school and never really struggled. So people around me at some point, I remember saying, oh, you could be a doctor, like a medical doctor, not a random doctor like you are. But I thought about it, but then it looked so much work, especially early on in the university degrees. The first couple of years are horrendous. You have to work so much, and the last thing I wanted to do is working my ass off the first couple of years. So I didn't choose that.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, I guess that's why we all pursue within the university system, is because, I mean, if it was boring and we hated it, we'd probably stop after a degree.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I mean, I've always said that I would continue doing this as long as I'm having fun. The moment it stops being fun, what's the point, really? You go and do something else.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not here for the money.
Yeah, that's for sure. Cool. Okay, well, thanks very much, Roma. That was really good.
You're very welcome.
And now we're joined by Sam Bell. Thanks for joining us, Sam. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. How are you all?
Pretty
thanks.
Good, yeah.
So today we'd like to ask you, what inspired you to get into earth and planetary science?
Well, I was really lucky when I was at school. We had some really enthusiastic teachers that were really into earth science and geology, and they actually set up an after-school geology club for us, which was really cool.
Yeah.
That got us super interested. And then thankfully I was at a school that then did A-level geology, which unfortunately isn't an option for an awful lot of people around the country at the minute. But it was one of the best A-level choices I've made, and then carried it on to uni.
So was it quite a random decision that you took then, or was it something you already had an interest in beforehand?
No, not really. Space-wise, I've always like been interested. Loved Apollo 13 and stuff, but yeah, the geology side just stemmed from liking physical geography, and then being like, well, that sounds interesting. Dinosaurs, they sound cool. Volcanoes, earthquakes, and then
what's not to like?
And I got hooked.
So, what kind of things did you do in the after-school club?
We did really fun. The dinosaurs were a big feature. We were super keen into them. But yeah, we did loads of things. We started off sort of following the curriculum for the GCSE geology, which was quite cool. We didn't end up sitting it in the end for reasons about like doing field work and stuff. And I think there's only a few of us left, but we did it for a full solid like 2 years nearly. So it was a long term entrance into geology.
And that was just your choice to attend that then?
Yeah.
Cool.
When you
you obviously clearly had something inside you that wanted to do geology.
So that's the right way to go.
Yeah.
Calling.
When you got to university, did you find you were already way ahead of everybody else?
Well, I still kept like the A-level textbook, so I was like using that still as a bit of a Bible. But yeah, I think it made it easier in terms of like when, terminology and stuff was being used. It was something that I'd heard for the past like 2 years, and then a few years before with this after school club as well. So it was like, I think it made it a lot easier in that sense to pick things up quicker and grasp things more. Yeah, super lucky.
Cool. Well, Sam, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, right. So next up, we're joined by Sam Halim from Birkbeck. How's it going?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you all?
Not too bad, thanks. So, what were some of your inspirations then to getting into the world of planetary science? Was there anything in particular when you were growing up that sort of inspired you, or?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about it. Kind of, I don't think it's ever been just one single thing that I can think of that's taken me the direction that I'm in now. I've always been interested in collections of rocks. I was that kind of kid that would pick up everything from the beach. But I think that the idea really came to mind of kind of Earth and planetary science when I was doing A-levels. And just randomly, as my fourth subject, I decided geology, why not give it a go? And it turned out to be my absolute favourite subject of all that I took. And yeah, it led me kind of to this path of earth sciences and space science as well, until now, where a PhD has kind of combined a lot of physics, astrophysics, geology, just combined into this one thing that's kind of my passion.
Yeah.
What do you think it was about the geology A-level that really won your heart?
Well, to begin with, it was actually the lecturers, the teachers. They really inspired me with their passion. It came through with how much they enjoyed the subject, and not only the aspects of it, but kind of putting those aspects to the students. It was the way that they expressed their ideas and the topics itself. I mean, I remember loving learning about trilobites for no reason, just because they were cool. I thought they were really cool, and the way they were taught was excellent. So yeah, I'd say that a big inspiration was the people that taught me at that point.
Yeah, it seems to be such a common thread, actually. A lot of people that passion.
It's such a major factor. And I think it spurred me on to find people that share that same passion as I've gone on, not only in peers, but also in choosing my PhD. I think it was a massive thing in finding a supervisor or a group of supervisors that really share that kind of passion and connect with the subjects.
Yeah. So did you always have in mind that you wanted to do something sort of more space related, or was that more just sort of a fortuitous set of events as well?
I think academically, I have always been drawn to science and space science as part of that, but I don't think I ever would have chosen to go into space science or astrophysics or anything without my master's, which was in planetary science. I don't think I would have gone in that direction unless I went to UCL at that point in my life. Yeah. So it's kind of fortuitous that came up at the right point, that I felt like I had the set of skills that could then do well in that. In that particular MSc.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for sharing that with us, Sam. It's been great to see you again.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah.
Next, we're joined by Zoe Morland from the Open University. Thanks for joining us, Zoe. How are you doing?
Doing good, thank you.
Great. Looking very sun-kissed from the holiday.
Yes, sun-kissed from the rain.
So today we'd like to ask you, what inspired you to get into planetary science?
I think my dad inspired me to get into science, and then when I opened up my first geology book, the very first page was in planetary science, and I always loved space, but I'm not a brilliant mathematician. I'm not very quick, so I thought that I was never going to go and do pure physics, but then I thought if I could do it from the geology side of things, then that was perfect. I was able to use my love of Earth as well as science and physics, and then combine them together to look at space rocks instead. Yeah.
So is your dad a scientist then?
Well, he's an engineer, so I think he'd have wanted me to go on and do engineering, but science is pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
In terms of at school, were you always enjoying physics, chemistry, biology, or were you just straight down the line?
Yeah, I think I always loved all of STEM, so yeah. I think going through and having the opportunity to go and do geology as an A-level was slightly different, so to be able to extend STEM to geology as an extension of sort of the science bit of geography was that was an opportunity. But I think even if I hadn't had that opportunity at A-level, I'd have gone through and done it as a degree as well. But I think even said that, I think everyone follows a particular path by what's offered to them at the time. So it was luck that I had geology at the school I was at. It was luck that Manchester happened to be a place that I could study an undergrad to do planetary science with geology. It's sort of luck of the draw of what is on offer to you at the time. So perhaps if I had never picked up that geology book and had never looked at that first page for planetary science, I may not have gone down that route. I didn't know that you could just study planets sort of from, like that you could look at the data that had come from missions, and that there would be so many people who would be doing that. And then even if you're not associated with a mission at all, that there was science available still to do. And I just had no idea about that, I think, before that. So I think it's now my goal to make sure that everyone knows that that's an available route, because I think that lots of people don't see that side of research science as an obvious career route. They think that there's got to be some company involved and you're making a product, or if some wider reason for research rather than just for knowledge.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, particularly for like planetary science, where there's no like defined subject at school or whatever. I suppose it may not be as obvious that is a route that you can take.
I wish there was. That would be great. Planetary science GCSE, I'd love that.
Well, thank you very much, Zoe. And maybe let's get designing a course then.
You saw it here.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right, so joining us now, we have Divya Persuad from UCL. Thanks, Divya, for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thanks so much for having me again.
That's great. Good to see you. So what inspired you to get into Earth and planetary science?
So what got me interested in earth science originally was I liked collecting rocks as a kid. And I think when I was about 4 years old, I asked my mom, how do I do this as a career? And she said, oh, you could become a geologist. You can collect rocks for the rest of your life. And I thought, that sounds like a good gig. And so I think begged for books on rocks and would borrow books from the library about geology. I didn't really understand, I think, that geology was so diverse. I was just interested in the fact that rocks existed. And I sustained that interest until now. But then in middle school, so when I was around 11 or 12, I saw one or two documentaries on planetary geology. And I remember, especially in one, seeing mostly female planetary geologists, which was really cool. And they were talking about how they do analog studies out in the field, and they get to go to these great locations and relate them to different planets. And I thought that was amazing. And then the second one was about different planetary missions and talked about the recent Huygens probe landing on Titan. So it was showing the really great video that was stitched together from the descent camera, and the image from the ground showing the pebbles that look so familiar to an Earth environment. And I've told this story many times. It made me really angry because we didn't learn about it in school, and I thought, surely this is something you stop teaching one day and you say, we just landed on Titan and these pictures look like home. And so I think since then I've been really passionate about science education and outreach as well, because I thought, we all have this right to know about our universe, and that these vastly different planetary bodies actually can look a lot like each other, and there are so many interesting reasons why. And I think that it was that angle that really gripped me. And I think a part of that was thinking about Star Wars and how you have all these different planets, and the same physics and chemistry dictate things on different worlds. And that can result in such incredible science, incredible visuals. So that really gripped me. And I made NASA my homepage, and so I was hooked from then, and I got into research pretty early because I really wanted to learn more about it. So yeah, that's my story of how I got into it. And it was always from this earth science angle of just really loving the fundamental idea of rocks and the rock cycle, and picking up a rock and thinking, wow, this traveled miles and miles over the course of billions of years possibly, and how there's a story in everything around you. And so yeah, I think there was an appeal to me as an artist and as a writer as well. So yeah.
I absolutely love how at the age of 4 you thought career out of this. You started really early thinking about planning career then.
And it's really lovely that your mum, instead of saying, oh no one's going to pay you to pick up rocks, are like, yeah, become a geologist. It's just like your parents are going to shut you down and be like, don't be silly.
Well, it was funny because at 4 I also decided, okay, I want to be an artist and a writer, and I've continued to pursue those things, and art became music. And so I always joke, like, somehow I had these premonitions as a child, but I also thought that my art, my writing would fund my science. I had this vision of like, oh, scientists probably aren't even paid. But if I make it big in writing a novel, then I'll fund my research, and that's how I'll go.
Amazing.
Well, the way funding goes at the moment, that might actually not be a bad funding model, really. Yeah. I think it's really cool, though, how as children, I guess we've seen this a few times now, this episode, how as children we have these initial interests, and it's amazing how they just stick with us all our life, really. I find that absolutely fascinating.
But it's really nice to hear that you've kept up with like the science side and the art side, because I'd say quite a few of our guests have been more split onto the science side. So it's nice to hear that you can pair these things together.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit tough, especially on kids, when we kind of tell them, you have to pick one career, or even just, I think we sometimes give the impression that you can't have a really fulfilling hobby that takes a lot of time in your life. So, I say I'm a writer, but it's not necessarily feeding me. It'll pay my groceries once a year maybe, but it's still it's an outlet, and it's also something that feeds back directly into the science, where I've learned how to tell stories through science and be a better communicator, where and science has given me so much imagination about writing, and it's fueled so many of the topics that I explore in poetry and that kind of thing. And it's just part of being a human being, and that's delightful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Divya. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we have Dr. Ashley King. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
So tell us about some of your inspirations and influences growing up or at university.
So I guess, going all the way back to when I was a kid, I think I was always kind of interested in rocks and volcanoes and earthquakes and things like that. And dinosaurs was always the big thing. And then I was exactly the right age for Jurassic Park. So I would have been, you probably got lots of people saying that, but I reckon I was 8 or 9 when Jurassic Park came out. So that did not help my obsession with dinosaurs at all. And then I think Apollo 13 came out a few years after that, not much after. And so that was the thing, I think, the film Apollo 13. I think it was the thing that made me think, I'd quite like to be an astronaut.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a weird thing to take away from that film, looking back. But at the time, it's like, at the time, I remember, I remember going to see the film really clearly in Norwich with my dad. And then I remember spending like weeks and weeks and weeks after that just staring at the moon and trying to work out what was going on the moon. So I think that's where my kind of geology and planetary sort of came from. And then when I did my A-levels, I had an incredible. So I actually did a geology A level, which is quite rare, I think, these days. It was quite rare at the time. And I just had my geology teacher just loved rocks, and there was only about 5-6 of us, I think, doing the A level. So it was quite a small group, and we went off and did field work, and and it was a bit like all geology courses are quite close knit. And so from that, I was just like, I'm going to go to university and do. If I could do planetary science, then brilliant. If not, do geology. And I was lucky enough that Manchester started their geology and planetary science degree course.
Yeah.
And it was good timing. I think when I started that was when the Pathfinder and was it Spirit or Opportunity? I can't remember. I lose track of the Mars rovers, but there were a couple of Mars rovers landed around the same sort of time. So
Spirit and Opportunity. Yeah.
Spirit and Opportunity. Yeah. It was like early 2000s, wasn't it? At uni, I always thought I'd end up doing sedimentology and looking at stuff on Mars, and then I realised that sandstone's quite dull. What I realised was actually, so what I'd never been sort of exposed to was the idea of meteorites. I'd probably come across the idea, but I'd never actually thought about meteorites going and having, holding a meteorite and stuff like that. And it was only at university that really became something that I was aware of and something that I realised I could do as a kind of career.
Do you remember the time when you first held a meteorite, or like the first meteorite that you first took an interest in?
Wow, that is a good question. No, not at all. No, I don't.
I'm so jaded to it now, Ashley.
Well, that's really interesting. However, I have no idea. So I suspect, because I remember visiting the Natural History Museum and places. So chances are, most places have a kind of iron meteorite that you can touch. Don't they? So I must have done, but I have no memory of it at all. And it would be good. I should go back through some photo albums and see if there are any pictures of me sat on a giant iron meteorite outside a museum somewhere. There must be. I must have done. I remember Dippy in the central hall, and I remember the robotic T-Rex that they've got, and being I'm still terrified of that today. It's pretty creepy. So it was definitely, and even today, like most of the people who go to the museum are there to see dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It's the big draw. But the dinosaurs were way into other, fields of geology and science. So it's a good thing. But basically, that was how it went. Was dinosaurs are quite cool, and volcanoes are quite cool, and then rocks and space, they're slightly cooler than it was just working my way up.
What we need then is dinosaurs in space. That's the next level, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Somebody, there was always, I can't remember who said this. Somebody said, if we could get an exhibition at the museum which was a meteorite found, like a fossilized dinosaur with a meteorite hitting it on the head or something, that would be the biggest draw you could ever have in a museum. So yeah.
Fantastic. Ashley, thanks very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We're joined now by Sarah Crowther. So what were some of your inspirations then growing up?
I don't think I can specify one particular thing. I always had an interest in science and space. I wanted to be an astronaut when I grow up. I still do, really. I do remember having a picture on the bedroom wall as a child, which actually I've just dug out this afternoon, of a picture of one of the Apollo 15 astronauts, Jim Irwin, on the moon. And he visited the school where my dad taught and signed pictures of himself on the moon for the teachers and the pupils. So my dad brought one of those home for us, and I remember having that up on the wall as a child. It might go back up on my wall now.
Oh, that's amazing. So were you a big Apollo nerd when you were younger, would you say?
I guess in a way, although, it was all before I was born, really.
So growing up, did you know that you wanted to be a planetary scientist, or is it just one of those things that happen?
No, I knew that I wanted to do something science related, and I actually studied chemistry at university. My undergraduate degree and my PhD were in chemistry. My PhD was in the physical chemistry, and we were using a technique called laser spectroscopy to learn about the structures of small molecules, so sort of 2-3 atom molecules. We were trying to find their internal energy levels. And then it was really just a coincidence that this job at Manchester came out, and it used the same kind of techniques that I used in my PhD, but applied them to different samples. So rather than trying to learn about the structure of the molecules, we're now using known information about atoms to enable us to study those atoms in extraterrestrial samples.
Cool.
Amazing. So that sounds good. You probably saw it and thought, oh, this is my chance to finally study something space related.
Yeah, but using the techniques and knowledge that I'd learned from my undergraduate degree and PhD at the same time. So best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next up, we're joined by Candice Bedford and Tom Barrett. How are you both doing?
Good, thank you. How are you guys?
Not too bad, thanks. So, Candice, maybe we could start with you then. So what were some of your inspirations, maybe growing up or in general, for getting into earth sciences and planetary science?
So Tom's probably going to laugh because he knows this, but yeah, growing up, I was a huge fan of Tomb Raider and Lara Croft. So I really always wanted to be an explorer like Lara Croft. And so although I never really knew exactly what kind of exploration I wanted to get into, it was very much a theme as I progressed, just throughout academia. And then when I was at college, I did both classical civilizations and physics, but I found I really enjoyed the sciences. And I decided going to university, I could always read Homer or read the Iliad, but I couldn't, if I wanted to continue in science, you kind of really need a degree. And I chose geology because got to travel, see the world, and yeah, and following on from Lara Croft, hunting down the secret mysteries of ancient civilizations, I was let's find out about the ancient past of the Earth, and then before we knew it, I'm on Mars. Yeah,
well, the ancient civilizations of Mars, famously. Yeah.
Well,
oh yeah, them aliens.
I wish. Let's see what Mars 2020 shows.
So how did you come to geology then? Was that something that you already had a bit of interest in when you were growing up, or was that fairly just a...
I was fortunate enough to be able to travel quite a lot, and I always remembered I loved volcanoes. Volcanoes has been my thing growing up. Just the coolest things. If ever you hike up a volcano and you know it's active, it's just you're walking on this sleeping beast. It's kind of both it's awe-inspiring and terrifying. It's just really cool, and just the kind of otherworldly nature, I guess, of it. Even during geology, I always got a lot more interested in kind of the bigger picture and what the geology that we'd learn about this planet could tell us about other planets. So as soon as I learned about meteorites and started learning that they had olivine and stuff that we see in volcanoes on this planet, I was oh, this is really cool. And so that's kind of how I ended up funneling into this planetary geology kind of direction.
Yeah.
Importantly, do you prefer the classic Tomb Raider games or the more recent reboots?
Classics, 100% classic. Car shouldn't have sold it to Crystal Dynamics. They've just Americanized it.
Tackling the important topics right here.
Yeah, classic Lara all the way.
So what about you, Tom? What were some of your influences growing up?
So I can imagine you've already heard this kind of cliche already several times today, but space is just kind of so vast and interesting, and I've been a massive sci-fi nerd anyway, since I was young. So it's kind of I'd really love to kind of do some space exploration and all of that, and I still harbour this kind of pipe dream of applying to be an astronaut and actually getting to go out there. So I focused my kind of schooling into the more science heavy things, and originally looked at kind of university, maybe doing like particle physics, cosmology, thinking like big picture stuff.
Yeah.
But kind of as the exams drew near, I thought I'll probably be like just about enough to scrape through. And then like 3 years of kind of pulling my hair out to come out with like an average mark. I was like, maybe I want to take my energies somewhere else. And I was always kind of, I really liked like the more physical geography aspects you're taught at school, like glaciers, volcanoes again, and I was like, well, geology sounds interesting. There's like field work and kind of sounds quite fun. There's interesting kind of stuff. I really like the kind of processes that the Earth, this planet that we live on, undergoes. And me and my dad always joked, well, you might always be able to look at space rocks in the future, and then look at me now, I've actually managed it. So yeah, it's kind of maybe a bit of a different sidetrack. I felt like I wanted to do just space exploration-y stuff, but we're probably several generations too early to be like starship captains, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm sort of hanging on the hope that by the time we're in our 60s or whatever, space travel might be a bit more common, that we can actually get to the moon eventually.
Yeah.
I only want to travel in comfort, so
not going Space Ryanair then.
no. Well, that'd be fine. Space Ryanair. Just anyway.
Could you imagine the leg room?
Yes.
You don't get free whiskey, I'm not interested.
So was there anything in particular then that you could pinpoint maybe to when you were little that first instilled that interest in space, or is it just one of those things that just pop into your head?
I suppose the sci-fi that I was kind of reading and watching on TV at the time, and just like I did lots of like scouting activities out and about in kind of the wilderness at night. So you get to see this kind of vast starry night, and also you're out and about, which I think gave me that love for like the physical world, and then the which led me into considering geology rather than going down this very hard physics kind of background. So it's just kind of that, the people have always looked up at the stars and wondered kind of cliche.
Yeah.
And also just great sci-fi video games.
Well, you say it's a cliche, Tom, but you're actually the first person who said it. But about 20 people have said about Lara Croft. So,
well,
I'm glad she's getting the respect. Scientific community.
Anyway, Candice, Tom, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks very much.
Well, there we have it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much to all our guests throughout the season, and to everybody who came back on to talk to us for this episode. It was really interesting getting to chat to everybody again. But in the meantime, we'll be back in September for season 3 of the Cosmic Cast, no less. And don't forget, of course, we're on social media everywhere. Don't forget, on the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we're on all these platforms all the time at Earth Solar System. But until then, see you later and have a lovely summer. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.